Hello everyone. This is my little code walkthrough, one of my projects that I did for my analytics classes in school. And I did a project on COVID infections. I was using Google Trend data to predict new infection rates reported by the CDC. So if you're unfamiliar with Google Trends, Google allows users to look at keyword searches and their popularity over time. So my assumption for this project was that if I use those popularity ratings by Google for COVID related terms, I was able to predict new infection rates depending on their popularity. So my hope was that the higher the keyword search term ranked for a certain week, the higher the new infection rates would be. So that's the one source. The other source was the CDC data, the daily reported new infection rates by the CDC for the US. And let us jump right into the code. So I use Google Colab um, to import the Google Trend data. So I use the PyTrends package to import the keyword terms and their respective interest over time into a data frame. So I use the time frame from whenever COVID hit the US to most recent, and I defined the location as the US. So here I just create a data frame for those keyword terms over time. And you can see this is very neat to have that here in Python very quickly with just a few lines of code. So I have those 5 keyword terms. Google only allows you to pull 5 at a time. I could easily do more with a for loop, but this already gives you a pretty good model. Um, and then next, I try to pull the CDC data from their website. That would have been a whole lot of effort. What I just did is I downloaded the daily data and then imported the Excel file into Python. And if you've noticed, this data is on a weekly basis. So what I did next is I converted the daily data into weekly average data to match the Google Trend data. So this is what that is, and it gives you 49 rows, which is exactly what we want to run a OLS regression later on. So I wanted to see what kind of relationship the Google Trend data has with the CDC data. So what I did next, I assigned those 2 data frames to variables to build a scatter plot to see if there's any correlation and what kind of correlation there is between the keyword search terms and the CDC data. So when I use COVID symptoms, it gave me the scatter plot. And you can see there's a very nice positive relationship between those 2 variables. Here on the x-axis, you have the Google Trend data, and here you have the CDC new infection cases. So that was very positive and left me hopeful for building my model. So I reassigned the data frames to new variables to run the OLS regression, and this is all you need to run the OLS regression, which gives me my model. So my model explains 87.6% of the variation, which is more than I was hoping for. But if you take a closer look at the coefficients, you can see that x2 and x4, which is fever and diarrhea, have a negative relationship, like an inverse relationship between the Google Trend searches and actual new infections, which is the contrary what I was hoping for. But nevertheless, they built a very good model. And I was able to use Google Trend searches to effectively build a model with quite a bit of predictive power. So using this model to predict next week's searches was the goal of this project. So that's what I did with the next 2 blocks of code. So again, I created a list of those keywords and I used a new data frame, which is this week, to predict next week's new infection rates. Um, I could have used the average, but I actually just used the most recent one from last Sunday. And what I did, from last week, and then I plugged them in and to predict new infection rates. And what this shows us is that um, for the for the Google Trend data that has these values, it predicts that new infection rates from a week from now should be just under 200,000. And if we look at the results, it is just around 200,000 plus minus, rather over 200K per day. But yeah, that's been it. That's my model. And thank you guys for watching. And if you want to find out more, I have my website in my YouTube channel where I will be posting more projects in the future. Thanks.